peace pilgrim, one of my heroes, said, "God's laws are implemented constantly. How can anyone doubt that eventually God will prevail? It's only how soon that is up to us." God's laws are implemented constantly. How can anyone doubt that eventually God will prevail? It's only how soon that is up to us. I have a theory, and one that this entire sermon is perched upon. The theory is that prophecy isn't just an idea. It is actually the idea revealing itself. I don't think this is a new idea. Let me try and explain. In spiritual direction, people don't just come to make up lovely ideas about God. What they bring to their spiritual direction is a truth that is already ringing and living inside them. Caroline Myss describes spiritual direction this way: the spirit within you always moves you towards reconciliation, healing, wisdom, courage, and love. It's the spirit within you that is driving. So when the prophets like John the Baptist are pointing, they're actually pointing with this change within their whole bodies. God is coming. Got a little video to help us really deepen into this idea.
When we talk about Advent, Advent is that season where we're talking about the God that is coming, right? And so here's the thing about what that Advent reminds us of: that God is always coming toward us. God never turns God's back on us. God's always coming toward us. We are called to move toward God. And so we are to recognize and see how God is coming toward us. God is coming toward us always in movements toward justice.
How do you move towards God?
And we move towards God by joining God in the movement toward justice, right? And so Advent reminds us that God is always coming toward us. And not esoterically, but in movements toward justice, toward freedom, which always are these perfect reflections of God's love. Our task is to go toward God. That's the Advent season to me. That's what it reminds us of. That we have people that must be going toward the God that is coming toward us. And we do that through acts of justice.
And what do we do when we get to God? When we go towards you?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. There was a commercial a long time ago when I'm a baby boomer, when they first introduced instant soup. And a little kid outside said, "Is it soup yet?" Guess what? It's not soup yet, because as long as there's one person that does not understand the justice and feel the justice of God, and one person that is not free to live fully into the sacredness of who God has created them to be, well, guess what? We ain't there yet. And so it's almost a moot question. Just keep going until you get there, until everybody can say, I'm free. And so we aren't there yet.
Prophecy comes because the prophet sees and experiences a divine truth. And once that arrives, you can never take it out. Saint Therese of Avila said, if God gets into the walls of your soul for even a second, it's enough to last you for the rest of your life. Prophecy exists not because some blind sage is foretelling a future that doesn't exist yet. No, prophets are people, whether they're blind or not, whose eyes are open to see what is happening in their midst. Now, the problems that we face are enormous. The brokenness and cruelty of this world are unbearably enormous. And we really are a broken people. We are walking wounded. And sadly, we're sometimes taking others out with us. But wounds are part of the program. Sickness exists, but so does our capacity for healing. Hatred exists, but so does our intrinsic altruism. Judgment exists, but so does our laughter. And we're talking about our quickening towards Christ in Advent. Now please, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking just about Jesus of Nazareth. I'm talking about the human state of enlightenment that is our shared destiny, the Christ. I think it's Richard Rohr that says, Christ is not Jesus' last name. It doesn't just belong to him. We are, in fact, one life. We are the same earth. We are the same light, merely expressed in a billion different forms. We share the same genes with orangutans and the trees, and the very sound of your laughter and the texture of your skin were given to you by your mother and your father and your great-great-great-grandparents. We are strands of love woven into a fabric of a conscious universe that is held together with love. We are not separate from this immense, unstoppable birthing and dying, which is life. Even when we release our last breath and step off the wheel of this world, we return into the dark source of the uncreated that then in time births anew again and again and again. But this is kind of too difficult for us to really take in. We can think about it, but to really know it, to really love, it helps if you boil it down to one life, one relationship, or in our tradition, one angel, one young woman, and a baby boy. Here's what I'm talking about.
We give you thanks for the babe born in violence. We give you thanks for the miracle of Bethlehem, born into the Jerusalem heritage. We do not understand why the innocents must be slaughtered. We know that your kingdom comes in violence and travail. Our time would be a good time for your kingdom to come, because we've had enough of violence and travail. So we wait with eager longing and with enormous fear, because your promises do not coincide with our favorite injustices. In the necessary dark, we pray for the coming of your kingdom on earth as it is around your heavenly throne. We are people grown weary of waiting. We dwell in the midst of cynical people, and we have settled for what we can control. In the necessary dark, we do know that you hold initiative for our lives, that your love planned our salvation before we saw the light of day. And so we wait for your coming in your vulnerable baby, in whom all things are made new. Amen.
That's the big picture. But the wee picture is our life. Meister Eckhart, when was he? He was born in 1260. I've got this quote. Let me get this up. He said, "What good is it to me if Mary gave birth to the Son of God 1,400 years ago, and I do not give birth to the Son of God in my own person and time and culture? We are all meant to be mothers of God." It helps if we take the Christmas message and really strongly place it into our lives, into our sphere of influence, into our story, rather than making God out there. Let me tell you a story about that in my life, and hopefully you can relate. 3 years ago, I had a really terrible Christmas. It was a Christmas where death came and visited. One of my best friends and his wife were pregnant. It was a few days before Christmas, and also the day before the baby was due. And my friend woke up, and she knew that something was wrong. She knew that the baby had died, a stillbirth, the day before it was due. So devastating. Now, this story is not mine to share the details of, but many of you will know this incredible devastation that has visited so many women through the centuries, so many mothers and fathers. And one thing that became so clear to me that Christmas was that one life, even a life that never got the chance to become outside of the womb, that one baby girl changed the world forever, changed my friends, changed me, changed the living history held there in the soil around their home with the ancestors and the trees. My friends belong to this earth in a new way. Of course, God comes as a baby. It could be no other way. If we are to be delivered to become our divine nature, then God must be birthed within us from our own flesh and blood. Otherwise, God will only be something beyond ourselves, something that we serve and appease, rather than something that we are. We are in God, and God births herself in us. We are Mary. One way or another, we will collectively wake up to our divine purpose. It's not just written in the stars. It's constantly becoming and quickening in the world all around us. And the prophets are the ones who have really seen this. They're really feeling it in their own lives, and thus they are talking about it. We are made in the image of God, and our life is a holy manuscript that delivers us towards love, a love that then can define us. And the thing about love, we all know this, once we experience it, especially in the form of a newborn baby, nothing is ever the same again. And during that Christmas 3 years ago, it was so clear to me as we cried, as we as a community gathered around this precious, precious family. There was no going back. There was nowhere to go to get nowhere that this love and this grief was not. And what they did and what we all did with them was to hold on to precious, to cradle the precious, to cradle the beautiful, precious, stillbirth baby, to love her, for the family to hold her, to get to know her, and for the rest of us to witness and love and keep on loving every year, every year, every year. Love demands that we honor her. A love this big defines us, and it makes all the trappings of the ego consciousness and consumeristic society completely irrelevant. They get blown out of the water. Now, we all know the story of the loss of one precious, innocent life. And we also know the story of the baby and the shepherds and the young mother on a donkey who was not welcomed. And we know this precious love revealing itself to us in the arrival of every baby that we are waiting for. There, holiness, God, whatever your name is, there you are with tiny fingernails. When we love another being, then without doing anything dramatic, we're saying yes to an entirely new world. And once we open to love, it changes us forever and in ever deepening ways. Ways that teach us to love and care beyond the self. To care for the nuclear family who looks like us. But then it ripples out to care for all of those. To care for all of life. The holiness that's right there in every single being. Emmanuel, God among us. Peace Pilgrim said, God's laws are implemented constantly. How can anyone doubt that eventually God will prevail? It's only up to us how soon. God is with us. I've got one last prayer video for us to hold in our hearts.
In our pain, our blue, our beautiful, our hard, our messy, our ugly, our struggles and our joys. God is with us. God accompanying us. God alongside us. God amid us. God among us. God beside us. God by us. God including us. God near us. God plus us. God upon us. God as companion to us. God side by side us. God in the thick of us. In the thick of our humanity. In the middle of this weary world. God is with us. In the gift and in the muck and mire of real life, we are called to be present, to be in the flesh with one another, accompanying others, alongside others, amid others, beside others, by others, for others, including others, near others, a companion to others, side by side with others, in the thick of others. God with us with others. God with the world in the thick of the beautiful and the messy. In that, a weary world rejoices.
I'd like to move into prayer now as we get ready for communion. Open our eyes, O God, especially if they're half shut because we're tired of looking, or half open because we fear we see too much, or bleared with tears because yesterday and tomorrow are filled with the same pain, or contracted because we only look at what we want to see. Open our eyes, God, to gently scan the life we lead, the home we have, the world we inhabit, and so to find among the gremlins and the greyness signs of hope we can fasten on and encourage. Give us a bigger vision of what you can do, even with hopeless cases and lost causes. Show us the world as in your sight, riddled by debt, deceit, and disbelief, yet also shot through with possibility for recovery and renewal. And lest we forget to distinguish vision from fantasy today, tomorrow, this week, open our eyes to the one person or one place where we, being even for a moment prophetic, might identify and wean a potential in the waiting. And with all this, open our eyes in yearning for the Christ light, on the mountains, in the cities, through the corridors of powers and the streets of despair, to help, to heal, to confront, to transform. O come, Emmanuel. Amen.